Hello, it's December the 4th, and today we're concluding our journey through the book of Daniel with the final part from chapter 1136 through to the end of chapter 12. We were looking at, in chapter 11, Daniel's unfolding of the things that will happen after his time, after the time of the Prince of Persia, looking into the time of Alexander, and then into the time of the division of the kingdoms between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. And in verse 36, we see Daniel's direct reference here to the coming Antiochus Epiphanes, one who would arise, who would be a terrible oppression upon the people of Israel. Antiochus, who was the son of Antiochus the Great, Antiochus Epiphanes, was determined to establish Hellenistic culture in Israel. He worshipped Zeus Olympus. So when Daniel says that he would bring in a god that wasn't his father's god, the gods of Babylon and gods like Tammuz, the one who it says women would worship, women would be attracted to, he rejects those for what Daniel refers to as the foreign gods, and particularly gods of the Greeks, as I mentioned, Zeus, Olympus. Except more than that, Antiochus does a terrible thing, and he declares himself to be an embodiment, an incarnation of Zeus Olympus, and he calls himself Theos Epiphanes, which means the manifest God. And this is terrible, this is blasphemy. Not only that, but he oppresses the people of God, and he brings in other nations, he brings in mercenaries, he sets up fortress in Jerusalem, staffed by foreign gods. Anyone really who would help him, foreign troops, anyone who would help him, and therefore he's seen as a real threat to the people of God. However, Daniel sees at the end of chapter 11 the rising of the people of Egypt, of the king of Egypt, again this north-south battle that's going on, and that Egypt would come in, and there would be a day of judgment, there would be a day of reckoning for Antiochus Epiphanes, and he would be overwhelmed from the south, and actually that he would die. And there would be an ending. Of course, Antiochus Epiphanes actually died in Persia, in Tabai, an untimely death, but he was taken out of the world picture, off the world stage. And so we come to chapter 12 here, when Daniel sees the great angelic presence coming. And this angelic presence he calls Asar Hagadol, the great prince. And he's called Michael. Michael in Hebrew means who is like God. And he's kind of seen as the patron angel, as the protecting angel of Israel, but his name does mean who is like God, Michael. And he's the one who's standing. It says that it's kind of a sign that God is overseeing all that is going on in history. And there's a direct reference in verse 2 of chapter 12 to resurrection of the dead. It says Daniel foresees that after all of this terrible time, this terrible suffering that is going on, the people will come through the suffering and they will be raised, and there will be a resurrection. This is only one of very, very few places in the Old Testament, in the scriptures, where this idea of a resurrection is referred to so openly and so explicitly. And then it says that those who are wise will shine as bright as the stars, or shine like the sky, and they will lead many to righteousness, and they'll shine like stars forever. And then, as we're drawing to a close, the angel encourages Daniel, and we're now drawn back to the chapter 10, where we see that Daniel is at the banks of the river Ulai, and this angelic being comes, and the angel now tells him to seal up what he's seen, because it's a mystery. And even though people are constantly trying to unpick the mystery of Daniel and to put dates and times on the days, it really is a mystery, and it's to be kept wrapped up. And then Daniel says he sees two others standing on the banks of the river, and they are witnesses, as it were, to all that he's written down and to this whole apocalyptic revelation that he's seen. And Daniel, at the end of it, is told that although this is secret and a mystery, he can go to his rest. He can go and rest now. And there's a promise in the very last verse of Daniel of resurrection, that he will also be raised, and that he will receive his inheritance at the end of days. It's a wonderful promise. As I say, very unusual in the Old Testament to have something so explicitly referring to resurrection. So much of Daniel points forward to what is coming. to the suffering of God's people, particularly in the hands of the terrible king Antiochus Epiphanes, but then of the temporary relief that comes through the times of the Maccabees and the restoration of the temple, and then pointing towards this kingdom of the one who is coming, the anointed one, whose reign will never end, whose dominion will never finish, and also pointing forward to resurrection, as Daniel does, which is the real culmination of the story. We can be so thankful to God that we live in this time where we've seen the first fruits of that resurrection take place in Jesus, and we also are promised to be part of that resurrection through faith in him. Have a very good December the 4th.